Hi, everyone. This is Tom Levine here, Cornerstone's tech guru. And today we're actually going to continue sort of the discussion that we had last time. The first one was more how to do basic interactions with your computer, how to change your desktop background. But this webinar will focus more on interacting with your files and some more advanced settings that you can do to really make your computer your own, hence the title. So without further ado, let's get started with some things I need to mention. First, housekeeping. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat or in the question box. I will be reviewing that periodically as we go, but also I will be looking for it at the end of the presentation. If you have a question about anything we're covering here, please go ahead and submit it there. Also, go ahead and connect with us. Feel free to follow us on social media and subscribe to our weekly Monday Minute newsletter and get the latest Cornerstone carrier and industry news. You can also reach out to me directly. That is my contact information down at the bottom of your screen. Phone number 513-487-5390. And my email is tlevine@crnstone.com. I do ask that you put Tech Tuesday in your subject line when you reach out to me, if that's what you're trying to talk to me about, since I do filter it out by subject line. Also, don't forget to look at our autopilot program. You can rest easy knowing that we'll be taking care of your clients. Autopilot's a compensation-based client referral program that offers the services of licensed representatives here at Cornerstone to quote, enroll, support, and provide year-round service to clients that you might not cover. Let's say you're trying to focus on life and someone that gets LTD insurance. That's sort of what we're here for. So if you want to, feel free to look into it a little further at www.crnstone.com/what-we-offer/autopilot. Also, through our Refer an Agent program, you can earn some money. Did you know that, or do you know an agent that might benefit from some of our services? With the Refer an Agent program, you refer someone, and after they make a sale, we can pay you $250 when they place their first application. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. You just have them submit a referral. We'll track and monitor the referral, and then after 6 months, you can earn a $250 bonus. So good idea to recommend people to Cornerstone. But that generally covers all of the preamble. So let's get into working with computers. I didn't mention it at the start of our last session, but we are operating in Windows 10. Windows 10 is pretty much mainly used now, but if you have a computer from the last 2 to 3 years, that's probably what you're running. A lot of what we'll cover is applicable to most versions of Windows, aside from Windows 8. Windows 8 was kind of a weird system, and it was more geared toward tablets. If you do have Windows 8, then it might be a little bit different. The last like 6 to 7 years, I've only seen one computer running it, so I wouldn't really worry. If your screen looks very similar to mine, but maybe slightly different thematically, you're probably running Windows 7, and all of Windows 7 is applicable to Windows 10. The one thing I want to mention is that if you are using Windows 7, support for that has ended completely as well. That happened on January 15th of 2020, so your system might not be as secure as a Windows 10 system. And while I won't go as fast as I can, this webinar will be available online if you ever want to review it as well. The Cornerstone Resource Center is where you want to rewatch this, or if you have a review, you can submit it through there. Also, I only slightly mentioned that, so I just wanted to restate it. So without further ado, let's get into some customization options that we didn't cover in our last webinar. Last webinar was more for people who have never interacted with a PC and are just looking to change their desktop background. But there's a little bit more that you can do. And to do that, we're going to first bring up our settings. The way I like to do that is I like to just open my Windows Start menu and just type SETT, and the Settings app tends to be the first thing that pops up. If I click that and open it, we get to the Windows Setting menu, which I showed last time as well. last time we were in the personalization tab, and that's where we're going to start. But we're also going to cover some of the systems tab today because it can be kind of useful. If I click on personalization, then we get to our normal personalization screen. While we went through backgrounds, colors, and themes last time, there was one section we didn't really cover in full, and that would be Taskbar. If I click on it here, we have several different taskbar options, and these are kind of the most useful part of changing settings, in my opinion. I really don't like having my taskbars at the bottom of my screen, let alone having it duplicated across multiple displays. And typically when you install Windows, it will default to something like that. So the best way that I found to fix this is just go into Taskbar and change some settings up here. First, locking the taskbar. Locking the taskbar is a pretty useful option, and what it does is it's supposed to be able to prevent you from changing your taskbar settings. I say supposed to because it doesn't typically work out that well. As you can see, I have my taskbar lock on, and if I just drag my Outlook icon to the taskbar and let go, I've pinned it to my taskbar. I can also move things around on the taskbar while things are locked, and I can even change the taskbar position. And I'll show you how to do this in a little more detail in a second, but I can still do that from here. Therefore, locking the taskbar doesn't really do a whole lot for you. I'm going to change this back to bottom for now and unlock it. There's really not much difference. Then we also have automatically hiding the taskbar in desktop mode. One of the unique things about Windows 10 is that it's actually a very good operating system for both, desktop computers, but also tablets and two-in-one devices. Two-in-one devices would be things like the Surface, if you've ever heard of that. It's a computer that functions like a tablet, but can also be a laptop. If I were to turn on hiding the taskbar in desktop mode, you can see it's vanished down here unless I pull my mouse there. And that works on the left, the right, the top, wherever you have your taskbar positioned. I think it's pretty useful if you have a bunch of icons on your desktop, but as we covered last time, that's not something I recommend anyway. So I tend to not use this feature. Then we also have the same sort of thing for a tablet mode. Unless you use a tablet, you're not going to need this option, but if you do have that, you can change that here. One of my personal favorite options are small taskbar buttons. What that means is the taskbar buttons right now probably already seem kind of small, especially if you have rather bad eyesight. But I know that personally I have 20/20 vision, and I don't like it when I have things in my taskbar going all the way through to the end. So I like to save a little bit of space typically and turn on small taskbar buttons. What that does is it shrinks the taskbar at the bottom of your screen, right down here, and it also shrinks the icons that you have displayed. This means you can fit more onto your taskbar without having a new, section of your taskbar open up. And it basically what that means is if you have too many things pinned to your taskbar, you'll get a little arrow key section down here. And that'll let you scroll through all of the different icons you have pinned to your taskbar. I really don't like having to scroll through that either, so I tend to turn small taskbar buttons on. But if you don't use it that much, or if you like to view things in their full size, you can leave that off as well. Then you also have Sneak Peek. Sneak Peek is something that's, in my mind, pretty useful. It lets you sort of see outside of the applications you have up. For instance, I'm going to drag this off screen for a moment and open up Excel. I'm going to turn Peek on, and I'm just going to open a new workbook for an example. If I then scroll over this side section here, you probably can barely see it, but it's this little tab at the very bottom right-hand side of my screen, right next to the notification center. It lets me see the desktop. And if I click on that, now I'm actually at the desktop. That way I don't have to actually minimize anything. If you're one of those people like me who likes to multitask, you probably have a whole bunch of windows stacked up on one screen or another. And by turning on peek, which is right over here, you can actually use that little tab there to just get to your basic Windows screen, and then you can open up whatever other program you want. It's pretty easy, and that's what I like about it. I will turn it off again and close the window. The last option down here is replacing your command prompt. That's something that you probably won't have to worry about, but it's more for developers and coders. It basically lets you get to the root of your machine and make changes, which is not something we're going to cover here today. The last thing I'd like to mention is showing badges. What badges mean, and I had a hard time figuring this out myself, is when you're, let's say, in Word or you're in Excel, and a little pop-up notification happens. Typically, the icon on your taskbar with this turned on will start flashing, and it will show you, which program is demanding your attention. That's a badge. It also lets you scroll over, and if you have multiple windows of something open, it will show you all of those windows as well. If you turn badges off and scroll over, you'll still be able to see the multiple windows, but typically it'll condense it or it'll just show you the one window that you're actively in. I like badges on personally because I like to get those notification pings, which just make these flash orange or whatever different accent color you've chosen and tell us which program is demanding our attention. As I get more into the bottom here, you get into just more placement options for your taskbar. Like I mentioned earlier, I like to put my taskbar on the left. I think it's just useful. If I click left here, you can see my taskbar is now hugging the left-hand side of my screen. If I wanted to, though, I could make it go to the top, or I could make it go to the right of my screen. It really depends how you prefer to see things and think. If you have a two-screen setup, you could even have your main screen be the screen on the left then, and use this left mirroring kind of thing. As you scroll down as well, you can also hide labels. This is something that I always have on because I always like to hide my labels. If I choose when the taskbar is full, you probably don't see anything different, and you won't. This really is more useful if you have, other settings turned on, but basically what it does is it pushes your icons to combine them together. Let's say I open maybe 3 or 4 different windows of Microsoft Word. I'm going to do that now. As you can see in my taskbar, I now have 3 copies of Word, and each of those copies of Word are different iterations of Word that I've opened up. That's because I am not combining the taskbar buttons. I always like to leave that on though, because what it does is it condenses all of them and lets me show all of the windows that I have open of a particular program. So now that we've covered those, let's get into some of the more optional things to choose for our taskbar. First being where I'm displaying it. I personally never have this turned on, but what it does is it duplicates your taskbar on both screens if you have multiple screens. I just turned that off, and now I don't have the taskbar on my right-hand screen, though it's not very easy to see. If I turn it back on, I get that taskbar back on the other side. And what I can do to really display it is I can go into some of my actual screen settings and I can change that as well. But we covered that last time, and I'm not going to go there this time. If you have it on, then you can choose when you're combining taskbar buttons as well below. And that's about it for the taskbar section, that is. There are a bunch of other options in here, and I'd heavily recommend exploring them. Under apps, you can uninstall different things that you have on your computer, as well as manage different apps that you have and different permissions that you have. So that's a section I definitely recommend looking into once you're more comfortable with what different programs are. The other one that I like is the system setting. And system settings are where you get into more of those display functions that I was talking about as well. As you can see, screen 1 is highlighted. If I select screen 2, that's how I select screen 2. I just scroll my mouse over it and click. What that does is it tells me which screen I'm looking to edit. If I scroll down, I can change the different resolution settings here. I can change different orientations as well, from landscape to portrait. That's useful if you have multiple displays and you have one screen sort of tilted on its side, but most people will just want to leave things as landscape. And then you can also change your displays. As you can see, I've kind of messed with my screen a little bit here, a little on accident, but if I hit revert, then it will flip my screen back to normal. So you can change a lot of those settings in here. Sound settings is where you can control your own personal input devices, mics, all of that. You can change your default here. I like to have my audio routing through my headphones personally, but I could also choose a speaker. It then also lets you set your device volume as well. There is an easier way to do that from the taskbar by just clicking on that little mic option here, though I don't think you can see what pops up. It's the same sort of slider. Then I have my input device, which is the webcam microphone currently. If I wanted to switch that to microphone 2, I now have audio routing through my actual microphone. If I go to my notifications and action center, I can change these settings here. I'm not going to get too deep into this one because I think the default options are perfectly fine. Then you have Focus Assist. What that does is it suppresses notifications. So if you get an email, you wouldn't see the push notification, but you can change these settings all in here. You can also set it so you only get priority notices. Priority notices you can choose from your list by clicking on that link, and it will let you add different apps down here to show what is a priority and what isn't. For instance, if I click add an app, I can choose apps from the devices shown. But we're going to go back. I can also answer any questions by clicking on the options below. Microsoft is really, really good about including something like this. I'm going to highlight it with the spotlight here. Or maybe the spotlight's not the best tool. Let's go ahead and use the pen in this section right here, the Have a Question section. If you click on Get Help, you'll be linked to Microsoft's Frequently Asked Questions page. And if you have a question about anything in the settings menu, typically at the bottom of the window you're in, it'll have a question section. And you can click that to show or to answer questions about what's going on your computer, which I think is pretty useful. The other thing I wanted to mention here, well, there are two more things in this area that I think are useful. The first is power and sleep. Power and sleep controls when your computer starts kind of shutting itself low a little bit. What I mean by that is it controls how much power your computer is getting. I think we've all walked away from a computer that's open before and come back to have the screens be black and the computer looking like it's off. That's where you can adjust these things here. First, a computer tends to go into sleep mode, which just means that it is sort of consuming a very low amount of power. Everything that's open is still open. However, it's going to just make your screens black, and it's not going to actually process anything to save some power. You can wake up from this mode by just jiggling your mouse a little like I just did. However, you can also control the amount of time that elapses before your computer does that from this screen. If you click on the drop down here under screen when plugged in, turn off after, you can choose how long it takes for your screen to go black. I personally like 30 minutes. Sleep mode is currently disabled on this PC. A lot of computers in a corporate setting will have this disabled, especially nowadays. Your computer has to be on in order to use a remote desktop app. However, if you have sleep mode as an option, your computer will go to sleep and then shut itself down. That's bad because then we can't access anything. So if you're going to do a remote use for your computer, you're going to want to make sure sleep setting is turned off. I can't change this. As you can see, it's managed by my organization. The last thing I really wanted to cover in this section, though, was storage. And this is where we're going to sort of transition to more of what is, in my opinion, the most useful part of what we're covering today, File Explorer and saving things. A computer is really only as good as the system used to log its files. Last time we covered some of the libraries, being, the pictures section, the document center, all of those in very little detail. But today we're going to get into it in a little bit more detail. To start, I wanted to show off the storage section. As you can see right up here, we have access to something called local disk C. And that's going to be the same on any Windows computer you power on. It is the disk drive that is located inside my physical box right over there. What that means is this is where my computer is saving any sort of information that is stored within this device. And I'm not going to get too deep into how computers work and the guts of it, but essentially what this is, local disk C, is the hard drive that is located in this computer. It's indicating to me that is the physical drive that is located there. When I say drive, I mean the part of your computer that is essentially what long-term memory would be to humans. It's the area that we're going to be accessing here in a moment. There are two different types of drives, and I'm not going to get into too much of the specifics of how they work, but I think it's important to understand the two different types of drives if you're shopping for a new Windows 10 computer. The first is a solid state drive. That's something that I personally prefer in computers. They are faster than the more traditional drives that you'd find in any desktop, and they save things in a better way. The only difference really is how that happens. A solid state drive is basically a really big flash drive, and I've taken apart a flash drive here to sort of illustrate how they work. If I hold this up to the screen, on one side, you'll see a black spot up here. That's the tiny little computer that's in every flash drive. And what it is a little memory controller. It's basically when you plug your flash drive into the computer, it's the thing that tells your computer where information is going to save to it. There are a few resistors on the board as well to control flow. And then on the back side, we have this really thick chip right over here. Well, I say really thick, but it's pretty small actually. It's just big compared to the rest of the board. What that is the actual memory. And all a solid state drive is this little flash drive blown up to save a very large amount of space. This disk drive that we have in this computer is about 237 gigabytes. Really, it's about 240, and that's about the smallest size you'll typically be able to find if you're going for a serious computer hard drive. The other type of drive I didn't take apart, but it's called a disk drive, and it's what most business computers use. Disk drives are slower than solid state drives, and the reason for this is the way they save things. Instead of having this little memory controller thing that you're seeing here, all they are a bunch of CDs that are stacked on top of each other with writing arms. It works very similar to a, what they call them, records. It's very similar to that. They write information by, recording information on a disk, and then they retrieve information by reading the information that has been saved on that disk. Obviously, physically looking through a disk is going to take a little bit longer than telling a computer, hey, pull up this information you saved, which is why they tend to be slower. One good thing, though, is they are actually more reliable than these little, SSD flash drives. SSDs tend to fail relatively more often. I say that very briefly because even though there is a difference, it's rather negligible. The only real difference is if you break a SSD, there's not much of a way to recover the data. Versus if you break a disk drive, you'll still have those solid disks and you'll be able to reference that information. What I personally like to do is do both. On my home computer, what I have is a solid state disk, and what that does is actually operate as my normal hard drive. I save everything there, I use it entirely, and it's really useful. Everything pops up very quickly. And then I have a disk drive as well, and what I do is I back up all my critical files to the disk drive. That way, if my actual solid state drive fails, then my disk drive is going to be able to have those files on it, and I can restore the files that way. That being said, next we're going to get into some of what these drives actually are and how you should save things. I mentioned at the last presentation that I don't like having a bunch of things saved directly to the desktop. This picture right here is a great example. This is just my desktop background that I have currently saved. And if you want to know how to change that, please refer to the recording of our last presentation. But what we're going to do is we're going to open up the File Explorer. That's indicated by this little file icon. And you can also get there by clicking on the This PC icon. If you have a new computer, it's defaulted there. You can open up the File Explorer that way. Or you can just hit your Windows icon and say File Explorer. And it'll be the first app that pops up. This is how you interact with the actual programs and files within your computer. This is also why I like to just use this to explore everything. You have a quick search bar up here. And what that does is it searches whatever drive you're trying to look through for any sort of file name. This is the most useful function of this, in my opinion, because I like to file things in a bunch of different folders and then I forget where I've saved it. So if you ever forget where you've saved a file, you can use that section right up in here, the quick search that I've sort of made a scribble on, to find it. Also, I want to bring your attention to this bar up here because I will be reviewing it here in a moment. And I'm going to also use my pen to circle that as well. What this is the address of where you are in your File Explorer. I say address because I'm a tech person, but really what it means is where you are in your overall file structure. Think of File Manager as literally your desk drawer. You might have a bunch of different files in there, but they're each in their own folder, and each of those folders might be grouped together within sort of a folder organizer. It's the same sort of thing here with the File Explorer. It's just a little bit more complicated. Over here on this side that I'm circling now, you can see a bunch of different quick access areas and different jump points. I say jump points, meaning different areas of your computer storage that you can very quickly click on to access. And if I clear out these drawings and switch back to my drawing mode, I'm going to get into these a little bit more. I've made this full screen just so we can see it a little bit better. But as you can see, we have multiple things over here. First, we have these libraries that I mentioned last time up here in the quick access. These are pinned here, and you can just right click on something to pin it. For instance, I don't think we have, well, let's unpin pictures and repin it. If I right click on something in the quick access menu, because right clicking is the shortcut we use to get to any sort of more advanced thing that we're trying to do to something in Windows, I can open the pictures in a new window here, or I can unpin from quick access. I click there and the folder is removed from quick access. If I wanted to change that, I have my music folder over here on the right. I can just right click on it and it's not updating because it's not a new window. I'm going to go ahead and close out and reopen my File Explorer. And well, I guess it liked to pin it. That's probably because it's an actual library. If I do the same sort of thing to my document center here and unpin it, and then I do the same to downloads, let's try that again. Ah, perfect. I did have a few that got unpinned. Excellent. We'll go back into how to pin those here once we get under the local disk. But each of these sections here are all of our libraries. If I wanted to repin documents, I could right click, pin to quick access, and documents will pop back up. It's a little finicky if you're trying to do it to libraries, and that's why they might not have been the best example. But that's typically how you would pin or unpin something. Not only can you do that to libraries, but you can do that to whatever folder you're using as well. If I click on local disk C, which is our local hard drive, then I get into more of the actual files of my system. I'm going to go through this real quick, but AGB is our proprietary tracking system. If you've ever pulled a statement from Cornerstone Online, I'm sure you've interacted with it. All of the files for it are stored here. And then we also have Intel over here as well. These are the two folders that you likely won't have no matter what Windows machine you're operating on. Intel right here is only here because the manufacturer of this PC is Intel. It is a Intel processor that's in this case, and that's why Intel is here. Intel or AMD or whatever sort of chip you're using will have a folder dedicated to it. And while that's not necessarily this folder, whoever made your computer is likely going to have some things they've installed specifically for them. If I click on Intel, I get logs here, so I know that that's specific to my processor, but there's a lot of bloatware that typically comes from a pre-built computer. And you can uninstall those things through the apps menu, or you could physically delete them from your computer by going into these files. I wouldn't recommend it unless you're a real hardcore computer nut like I am. Then we have performance logs. Performance logs are tracking information for different errors or other sorts of performance features of your computer. It's not something you probably will really want to know about, but one thing that I think is really useful knowing is the difference between program files and program files x86. And while I'm hesitant to click on these because I don't know what programs are displayed in these, could be proprietary, it is useful to know what these are. Computer CPUs come in a bunch of different flavors, I guess I'd say. The bitting on them specifically is basically what's used to tell you how many different things your computer can work on at once. That's probably the layman way to explain it. x86 is program files that are intended for a different type of computer chip, but can run on the computer chip that you're running. That's why they install to a separate place. Program files are program files that are made explicitly to run on whatever type of CPU you are running on. So they keep it separate for the computer to think through them differently, but they're basically the same thing. It's where all the actual program data of your computer gets saved. If I click on temp, these are temporary files that your computer will create and delete from time to time. You should never have to really access it. It's something I would ignore. But if you ever have a file open from like your internet browser, it'll likely be displayed somewhere under here. There are a lot of hidden folders in here as well that you can't see unless you're like an administrator or you're someone who's working in the guts of your system. So when you open it, normally it'll be blank. But if something is here, you can interact with it, but it's not normally going to have anything. Users is where we're going to go in a moment. But I want, before I do that, to talk about this Windows folder here. If I click on Windows, it's got a bunch of different information saved. And this is all the information related to your actual computer's operating system. I would not recommend messing with this folder at all, but that's where it's saved. And I got to all of that by clicking on local disk. The reason I was able to get to this is because all of my operating system is saved to this disk. I'm not going to click on it, but I want to mention all of the other icons spread below here. These are all network drives, which I'm not going to get too explicit on describing, but essentially they're other hard drives that are connected to this computer. They're just not located physically in this computer. If you had multiple hard drives in your computer, you would see an icon similar to this one on local disk, and it would be listed separately the same way that these network drives are. What I like to do is have my operating system installed to one drive and then have all of my files and folders pull off of another drive. And what that does is it speeds things up quite a lot with my computer. It's also why I recommend not saving a whole bunch of stuff to your actual computer locally unless you have a dual drive setup. You can also get a removable hard drive or an external drive to save your files, and I think it's pretty useful. I don't have a favorite, and honestly, you're probably fine with whatever external drive you decide to get. Just make sure you get one with enough storage to save all of your files. After you save it, it'll function the same way as this USB. But if you are going to save some files locally, we're going to get into users. The user's profile shows all of the users who are set up to log into and use an individual computer. I'm going to click on T. Levine because that's me. But as you can see, we have a few different people in our organization who are set up to use the webinar computer. If I click on that, this is where I get into my specific view of my screens. I have different 3D objects I can save here, contacts, desktop, documents, downloads. These are all libraries. Libraries are default file folders that Windows will save things to. I don't necessarily like using it for everything though. I think pictures and music are really great folders because I like to keep those kinds of things separate as well. I also like to have a separate links section because that is where any sort of web browser you're using can save well, not favorites, but can save their links. Also, we have favorites here, and that's, what actual favorites are set up to be used by my web browser. I click on links as well. I have a bunch of different shortcuts here. And this is sort of the other area where you can put shortcuts in your computer. As you can see, mine has desktop and downloads, but I could also set up other shortcuts here as well. And I'll show you how to set those up in a moment. Then we have our actual files. Files look like this. I have a little demo that I've popped up. But this is the area that I'd recommend creating your own file system under. I like using my own file system for things like documents, projects that I'm operating in, different things that I want to save to my computer, but don't actually want to save to my desktop. For instance, if I'm working on something and it has 12 different documents associated with it, I don't want to have 12 different document icons on my desktop back here. And I don't want to have to just go to my desktop, click on another one, go to my desktop, click on another one. It slows down your computer, and it's not the best organization. I have a demo up here to sort of display different ways to organize your files. But if you're going to create your own file system, first you need to know how to create your own folder. All you have to do in File Explorer is go over to a blank area of the File Explorer screen and right-click. Then you can go under New, and you can make a new whatever is displayed. Folder is the first option, and Shortcut is the second. We're going to click on Folder. And when I click on New Folder, I have a folder that gets displayed right up here. If I right-click on it, I can rename it. If I didn't, change a name when I created a new one, by default, you can just start typing and it'll name the folder. I'm going to call this one Delete because I'm going to delete this later. Once you make your folder, you double click on it, and now you're under that folder. This is where I'd like to bring your attention one more time to this top section right up here. What I really want you to focus on here is the little arrows and the actual icons that are being displayed. For here, it says this PC, local disk, users, T. Levine, delete. And if you've been following along, you might be able to pick up on why it's saying that. This is the file path that I'm using in my Windows Explorer. What that means is this is where I physically am in the File Explorer. If I go back a level, I can do that by clicking on this up arrow or just back, because the back arrow sends you back to what you were just in. I'm going to click up though this time. I go one step up in my file organization, and now you can see delete is no longer there. If I double click on this bar, I get this little shortcut here. And what this is right here is the address of where I was. What that means is it's what's physically telling the drive to actually go to a specific location and access information. For instance, if I click on documents, this is why I don't like using the documents section to actually save documents and projects. As you can see, there are a bunch of different recordings that have automatically saved here. We have different chat logs for all the different chats of Tech Tuesdays that I've given. I have this data sources section here in Ring Central Data. A bunch of different apps will save and create documents here. And it's, in my mind, not very conducive to save things you're actually trying to find in here for that reason. That's why I recommend creating your own. I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well, and bring us into the File Explorer demo to sort of show how these things can all be used together. If you're making your own files, there's a few different ways you can organize it. But before we get into that, let's say I wanted to, from File Explorer demo, go back into my local disk, the C drive, because let's say I wanted to just access something and I forgot where it was, and I wanted to search the entire drive. What I would do is I could just click on local disk C here, click on local disk C here, or enter this PC / local disk into the browser here. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to click on local disk up here. And now I'm all the way back at the C drive level of view. If I then want to go forward, double click users, double click T. Levine, and as you can see, those are populated. If you have a question about this part, please let me know. I'm happy to try to explain it in a different way. But in my mind, this is probably the most basic level of using your File Explorer. It allows you to jump between folders very easily and show you where in whatever file structure you've created you are. When you're creating these, though, there are a few different ways you might want to organize your files. You could organize them under just a folder that says, projects, and then a list of the projects list the projects that you're working on. If I click on by carrier here, as you can see, I've put a bunch of different carrier folders under here. If I click on Aetna, then I have a few other folders here, and I've just subdivided it over and over and over. One of the things that I personally believe about file organization, you don't have to match this at all, but I like to, is the more specific you get with your files, the easier it will be for you to find and retrieve information. That's why I have this folder subdivided so much. Even, under Aetna, I have clients, commission documents, or quotes. And that's sort of what I'm getting at. If I click on clients, that's the end of the file tree. And I could save whatever document I want here. I could save an Excel file, I could save a Word document, I could save pretty much anything. That's sort of what I like to do for organizing my files. I actually have a good example file here that I can save in this file tree. And that's what I'm going to do here in a moment. But you can also organize things by date, or you could organize them by topic. Personally, I think the best way to organize things is start off at the very most basic level. Under your C drive, it'll be something like, my files. Then after you go into my files, you can get more specific, say things like either, Word files, Excel files, that sort of stuff, or what I prefer is by, different section. At home, I have a different folder for, important life documents, things like taxes, bills, those sorts of things. Then I have another section for, files that I just like to mess around with or reference and links and all of that. I sort of create my own file system for everything. And it's just easier for me to retrieve information that way. Saving things is completely up to you though, and completely freeform. So you can save things however you'd like. And it'll even tell you if you've named something wrong or if there's an issue with how you're doing things as well. So it's pretty useful. Either way, let's say I wanted to save something to that Aetna folder that I had just created. I can click on this little save icon here to quickly save where things are saved. Or what I should do is go to File and then Save As. Most Windows options will give you this like current folder section, and that shows the folder that this sample is saved to. I did a very bad thing. I saved this folder to my desktop, but I did that because I'm going to delete it in a minute, and it's a temporary file. So let's go ahead and browse right here. If I hit browse, the first thing it'll do is bring up basically another File Explorer window. This is the save view of this. And what it does is it tells me or lets me physically direct where I'm saving my file to. I want to save this under that Aetna folder as a sample. So I'm going to go to my C drive, Users, T Levine, File Explorer Demo, by carrier, Aetna, and I'm going to save this one under Commission Documents. Because this is a document, it's not related to users, it's not related to any sort of other information. It's a good spot. Alternatively, in this menu, I could right-click on the blank spot and create a new folder as well to save things in. Let's do that actually. And let's call this script, because we don't like to save things that are solid icons where folders are. If I click on script and now hit save, I've saved this to that location. And to prove that, I'm going to go into File Explorer Demo, again, by carrier, then I go to Aetna, script, and here's the file. Now, if I didn't know where I'd save this to, and I have a file system like this, I think it's pretty easy to think that, it's going to get lost. You won't forget where you've saved things, Tom. You won't remember where you have it. Well, that's kind of true, but not necessarily. I'm going to start at the local disk level, and I'm going to search. That file is called beginner's script. And if I type beginners and hit enter, it'll start searching. And it'll take a minute to search because it's searching the entirety of the disk drive that's saved to this computer. But as it's doing some searching, what it's doing is it's looking for any file, any sort of folder, anything really that matches beginners in that name. I'm not 100% sure what else it'll find and bring up, but it's going to search all of the local disk drive for it. And because I've saved the beginner script to the local disk drive, it will likely find it here. It's going to take it a minute, like I said, just because we're searching through our local disk C drive. But the point I want to make is that it's searching all of the things on our local disk drive for the word beginners. It's not searching what's inside of the document for that. What it's searching for that is in the file name. And because my file name was beginner script, as you can see, it found anything that has beginner script listed. And it has the type right up here, if it's a shortcut or another sort of program file, or it has the file path displayed right here. As you can see, apparently there's also a Internet Explorer file called beginner script that it's pulled from our local disk. So That's sort of how I like to search through all of my file tiers if I've forgotten where I've saved something. It's picking up two different files that are actually files. The beginner script sample that I said I'd save to my desktop, and the one that we just saved. Let's say that I didn't want to just open up this document, but I wanted to move it and change where it was located. I can do that by right-clicking and scrolling down through here. Near the bottom, right above the properties, it says Open File Location. I click on Open File Location. Now we look at this little Explorer thing up top, and it tells me that I'm now back under Users, T. Levine, File Explorer Demo, by Carrier, Aetna, Script. And I have this file here. Let's say I wanted to move this from one part of my drive to another. There are a few different ways I could do that. I'm going to first show you the manual way, which is what I prefer, but then I'm also going to show you the drag and drop way. The manual way is to right-click on the file and just hit cut. What that does is it will remove your file from the location that you've just hit cut on. And when you get to a different area, let's say I wanted to save this under the Altrua folder, under by carrier, I'm just going to right-click and hit paste. What that did is it's now moved this beginner script under carriers, Altrua. If I go back to carrier, Aetna, script, now that folder is empty. But I'm going to leave this one up as a good way to show you how I would also manually move things. In order to open up a separate instance of File Explorer, I'm going to hover over the File Explorer icon, right-click, and now, as you can see, we've got all of the different areas that we've recently accessed listed. If I just click on Altrua, it'll open up a new File Explorer, and it'll be in that Altrua location that we just created. If I drag to the edge of the screen and let go, in Windows 10, that'll drag and drop the folder views so they're right next to each other. There's another way to move this file besides the cut and paste method. I could click on it, drag it over, and drop. And there we have beginner script, now under Aetna script. That's located right here. If I wanted to move it back, I just drag and drop. Same way that you drag and drop things out of a flash drives folder, because essentially they're both the same thing. I can also, however, copy and paste. And if I just copy Altrua right here, and then go to this Aetna file location, right click and hit paste, now I have them located in both areas. And were I to search my drive again, it would come up with 3 copies of beginner script. If I want to delete a file, all I do is click on it and hit delete on my keyboard to delete it, or I can right click on the file and hit delete. When you delete files from here, it will go to your recycle bin. If I open up a recycle bin here, you can see all of the different things that I've deleted on this computer recently. I've got my beginner scripts from both sections here. I've got the delete folder that we created. And I also have a Tech Future webinar that I did at the end of last year here as well. This is the same computer that I used then. So if I wanted to fully and permanently delete something from my files, I have to actually delete everything under this recycle bin as well. I'm going to do that for everything except this top version of beginner script. And if I hover over it, I can see the original location sort of spelled out in the little pop-up section. It says original location, users, T. Levine, File Explorer Demo. This is the version that I saved under the Aetna folder for script. And this is the one that we're going to save to do something else a little bit fun. If I highlight all 3 of these, now that they're under the recycle bin, and hit delete, it'll ask me if I want to permanently delete all 3 of those items. The reason I did it that way is to show you that you don't have to move files one at a time. Those drag and drop methods and the cut and paste methods will both work on multiple files if you have multiple files selected. The way that I did that one is I just clicked, dragged, and let go. But alternatively, you can click on a file, hold down the Control button on the bottom left-hand side of your keyboard probably, and then click another file as well. And that's how you would select multiple files. If I let go of the Control key and then hit this delete folder, as you can see, it's now only selecting delete. But either way, I'm going to select all three of those, hit delete, and permanently delete those. Now, that is actually permanently deleted from this recycle bin. If I were to search my drive now, it wouldn't pop up with the files. But I think it's important to know that doesn't mean the files are actually fully deleted. What that means is those files are just gone from your disk drive. It's tough to really describe, but the way that drives work is they have, little bumps or magnetic ones and zeros that are saved to the drive. If you fully delete something from your drive, what it's telling that drive is that that space that was taken up by that file is now able to be written over. It doesn't actually fully remove that information from your disk. And that's why in crime shows you see, a bunch of people say, oh, well, I deleted it. Nope, saved to your hard drive. What that means is the data that was on your hard drive is still there. It's just that you can't access it through your operating system. You can actually access those files anyway. So if you think that deleting things from your recycle bin is really fully deleting them, that's not what it's doing. All it's telling your disk drive is that space is no longer going to need to be referenced. So the last thing that you can really do to interact with files on this level is right-click on something in the recycle bin and restore it. It's not quite popping up here if I right-click, but that's because instead of clicking on it initially to select, like I just did, I just right-clicked. Now that I have this file selected, it'll pop up with an option called Restore. And what Restore does, if I click on it, is it removes a file from your recycle bin and puts it back in your file folders where it was. If I open up my File Explorer now and go back to C, Users, T. Levine, File Explorer Demo, by Carrier, and remember this was that Aetna document we restored. Under our script, we have this file back here now, even though we deleted it. But that's about everything we were hoping to cover today. Hopefully you understand your File Explorer a little bit more, you understand how to search for documents, and you know a little bit more about some of the settings that we didn't cover last time. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type those to me now, and I'll be happy to answer them. But if you don't have any questions, or maybe you think of something later, please feel free to reach out to me directly at my email address, which I'm going to be putting back up at the screen again. It's tlevine@crnstone.com. Also, I would heavily recommend just sort of setting up your own file system and playing with the File Explorer a bit, and also messing around with some of your other settings. It's very easy to forget things in a computer environment that you're not actively learning or actively using. As a result of that, it's going to be difficult to remember all of this unless you're using it frequently or you're changing things, on your own. I'd recommend rewatching this video, maybe following along and seeing if you might want to refresh your memory. Like I said, all of these videos are going to be recorded and they are all going to be available under the Document Center under our website, www.crnstone.com. My name is Tom Levine, I'm Cornerstone's Tech Guru, and as always, have a wonderful rest of your week. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. So sorry, one final thing. we didn't actually cover making a shortcut, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So if you go to your File Explorer, and we're going to use that beginner script that I've been using today. If I go to my C drive, users, T. Levine again, and then go to File Explorer Demo, my carrier, Aetna, script. It's not here because I deleted it. Let's go ahead and just populate that right there. I have this little Word document here that let's say I want to make a link to. I can make the shortcut from this file specifically, or I could make a shortcut to Aetna, or pretty much anything the same way. You can make shortcuts to files, you can make shortcuts to folders, you can make shortcuts to programs, you can make shortcuts to anything. And on your desktop, that's indicated by this little shortcut link right here. Let's say I wanted to make a shortcut to this beginner script. What I would do is I can right-click on beginner script and hit create shortcut. What this does is this creates a little link to show, I want this file to have a shortcut here. This shortcut just tells your File Explorer where to go to access the file. If I drag and drop that from my File Explorer to my desktop, it'll move that shortcut that I just created to my desktop. And if I double click on it, because it's a shortcut, it knows that I'm referring to that file, and it will open up the actual thing that I had typed up for this presentation. That's generally how I create shortcuts, but there's also another way. If you right-click on your desktop, you can paste the shortcut that you have copied, if you created it my way, or if you want to unselect that and right-click, I can go to New, Shortcut. It'll then ask you for the location of the item that you're looking to create a shortcut to. You can drag this window around and select other things. This is the very last thing I wanted to show about File Explorer. If I right-click on this address bar up here, I can then copy the address or copy the address as text. If I hit copy as text and go back to here, I can just Control V, and that pastes the entire file path. Alternatively, if I delete this, I can click on Browse, and what that does is it opens sort of a mini File Explorer menu. I can go and use this to go to Tom Levine, File Explorer Demo, by carrier, Aetna, script, and click on Beginner Script. If I hit OK, then I have the file location here as well. Or if I hit Next right here, well, I guess there is one other way. The other way to create a shortcut, I'm not going to get too much into. I think it's a little bit much, but what you can do is you can actually go into the Windows key here and search create shortcut. I don't think it's the most useful option. Either way, once you have your location listed, hit Next. Then you can type your name for your shortcut. We can call this shortcut to beginner. If I hit finish, I've just created the same shortcut using a different menu. Personally, I think it's much easier to just right-click, create a shortcut, and drag and drop. But if you want to do it that way, you can as well. So, good question. Is there anything else? All right. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. But like I said before, if you have any other questions that you didn't feel comfortable asking, please feel free to reach out to me directly I know we went through a lot of things and we went through them pretty quickly, but these are just sort of the basics of interacting with Windows, and you can find that information in a lot of other places as well. My recommendation, if you ever run into a question and I covered it in a webinar, is to just go to our section of our website on www.sierraandstone.com, and you can actually find the recordings. If I go back into the internet browser, www.crnstone.com, it'll bring up our website. And then all I do is go into Resource Center, Webinar Series, and then I can click on Tech Tuesday Access Recordings. Here you see Basics of Working on a Windows Computer, which is the webinar I'm giving now, and Making Your Computer Your Own, which was the last webinar that I did. So if you have any questions, please feel free to rewatch those videos or send me you can give me a phone call or you can send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Once again, if you're going to send me an email, please say Tech Tuesday in the subject line. Thanks and have a wonderful day.